The training hall was very big. It was bigger than any building Danny Cole had ever seen back home on Earth. The walls were made of some kind of metal that changed color when you looked at it from different angles. The ceiling was so high that small clouds sometimes formed up there. When too many cadets breathed in the same room, Danny sat in the third row, between a Zaloni cadet whose body was covered in hard shell plates and a Falari whose orange fur smelled like cinnamon. There were 37 cadets in the room, and Danny was the only human. He was used to that by now. Humans had only joined the Galactic Coalition 18 years ago, and most species still looked at them like they were children who had wandered into a room full of adults. Instructor Veltos walked to the front of the room. He was a Crethian, which meant he was almost 8 feet tall and covered in scales that looked like someone had spilled oil on dark metal. He had 4 eyes, 2 on each side of his head, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Today we talk about death," Velthus said. The room got very quiet. Velthus touched a button on his wrist, and a hologram appeared in the air above his head. It showed a weapon. The weapon looked simple, almost boring. It was just a long tube with some cables attached to it. But Danny noticed that several of the older cadets had gone pale. "This is the Sunderbeam," Velthos said. "It was created by the Vorn Collective 200 years ago. Since then, it has killed more soldiers than any other weapon in the history of the galaxy. It has destroyed fleets. It has ended wars. It has made the Vorn the most feared species in known space." The hologram changed. Now it showed a piece of armor, thick and heavy, and covered in symbols that Danny did not recognize. "This is Crethian battleplate," Velthos said. "My people have worn it for 1,000 years. It can stop plasma fire. It can survive the vacuum of space. It can protect a warrior from almost anything." The hologram showed the Sunderbeam firing at the armor. There was a bright flash of light. When the light faded, the armor was gone. Not broken, not melted, just gone, like it had never existed at all. "The Sunderbeam destroys it in less than 1 second," Velthus said. The hologram changed again. This time, it showed a different kind of armor, one that seemed to be made of crystal. "Zaloni crystalline shields," Velthos said. "The hardest natural material in the galaxy." The beam fired. The crystal shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, destroyed in 0.3 seconds. Another change. Another type of armor. This one was dark gray and seemed to absorb the light around it. Hollow steel of the Andari Forge worlds. The most advanced artificial material ever created by any species. The beam fired. The armor melted like ice in a fire, destroyed in 0.7 seconds. Velthos turned off the hologram. He looked at the cadets with all 4 of his eyes, and Danny felt like those eyes were looking right through him, seeing every weak bone and soft muscle in his human body. "No armor can hold against the Sunderbeam," Velthos said. "None. This is not opinion. This is not theory. This is fact. 400 years of research by the best engineers in the Coalition have failed to find a defense. The only way to survive a Sunderbeam is to not get hit by one." The Zaloni cadet next to Danny clicked her mandibles. Danny had learned that this was how Zaloni laughed. "That is why our doctrine is evasion," Velthos continued. "Speed, movement, never standing still long enough to be targeted. The armor you will wear in combat is not meant to protect you from the beam. It is meant to protect you from everything else while you run away from the beam." Danny raised his hand. The room went silent in a different way now. Danny could feel the other cadets looking at him. The human. The small one. The one whose species had only learned to travel between stars when most of these cadets were already alive. Velthus's 4 eyes focused on him. "Yes, Cadet Cole? Has anyone tested layered armor, sir? Different materials stacked on top of each other, with gaps between them to spread out the energy?" The Zaloni cadet clicked her mandibles again. Louder this time. "The human thinks he knows better than coalition engineers," she said. Her name was Prith, and she had made it very clear since the first day of training that she did not think humans belonged at the academy. Velthos held up one of his forearms, and Prith went quiet. Coalition engineers have tested every possible combination of materials: cadet coal, layered armor, ablative armor, armor with force fields, armor with energy dispersal systems. The Sunderbeam adapts. It learns. It finds the weakness in any defense and exploits it. That is what makes it so dangerous. Danny nodded, but he did not look away from the instructor. What about armor that does not have a weakness? Armor that changes its properties in real time? Such armor does not exist. But could it exist? Velthos was quiet for a long moment. The other cadets were staring at Danny now, and he could see different things in their eyes. Some looked annoyed. Some looked curious. Prith looked like she wanted to break his skull with her armored claws. In theory, Velthos finally said, anything could exist. But theory is not reality. The gap between what is possible in mathematics and what is possible in the real world is very large. Many have tried to cross that gap. All have failed. But they tried, Danny said. Yes, they tried. Then someone should keep trying. Velthos made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was hard to tell with Krethians. You are welcome to try, Cadet Cole, but I would suggest you focus on your training instead. Learning to run fast will keep you alive much longer than dreaming about impossible armor. The lesson continued. Velthos talked about evasion tactics, about how to use terrain and movement to avoid being hit. He showed videos of soldiers surviving Sunderbeam attacks by being faster and smarter than their enemies. Danny watched all of it. He took notes. He asked no more questions, but that night, after the other cadets had gone to sleep, Danny walked to the Academy's engineering bay. It was a huge room filled with machines and tools and materials from 100 different worlds. Most cadets never came here, except when they had to for class assignments. Danny found an empty workstation in the corner. He sat down. He pulled up a holographic display and started reading everything the Coalition had ever published about the Sunderbeam. He read until the artificial sunrise cycle began and the other cadets started waking up. Then he went to his morning classes, his eyes red and tired, but his mind more awake than it had ever been. Prith saw him in the hallway and clicked her mandibles. You look terrible, human. Did you stay up all night dreaming about your magic armor? Danny smiled at her. Yes, he said. I did. He kept smiling as he walked away, leaving Prith staring after him with confusion in her compound eyes. She did not understand. None of them did, but Danny understood. He understood that somewhere in all that data, somewhere in all those failed experiments and dead soldiers and destroyed armor, there was an answer. He just had to find it, and he would, no matter how long it took. The weeks passed slowly at the academy. Danny went to his classes like every other cadet. He learned how to fly small ships. He learned how to shoot energy weapons. He learned the history of the Galactic Coalition and the names of all the species that belonged to it. He learned the rules of interspecies communication, which were very complicated because some species considered eye contact to be a greeting while others considered it to be a death threat. He did well enough in all of his classes. Not great, not terrible, just well enough to not draw attention. His instructors wrote things in his file, like adequate performance and meets basic standards and shows limited initiative. They did not know about the engineering bay. Every night, after the other cadets went to sleep, Danny walked through the quiet hallways of the academy until he reached the big room full of machines. He always used the same workstation in the corner, the one that was partly hidden behind a broken fabrication unit that nobody had bothered to fix. He would sit down, pull up his holographic display, and work. He read everything he could find about the Sunderbeam. He read the public research papers. He read the military reports. He read the engineering analyses. He read the obituaries of the scientists who had died trying to test their theories. There were a lot of obituaries. His roommate noticed that something was wrong. Koss was a Falari, which meant he looked like a very large cat that walked on two legs and wore clothes. His fur was the color of autumn leaves, and his eyes were yellow with black slits in the middle. He was kind in a way that Danny had not expected from an alien, always asking if Danny had eaten enough, and if Danny was sleeping well, and if Danny wanted to talk about anything. One night, about 2 months into the term, Koss was still awake when Danny came back to their room. The Falari was sitting on his bed with his ears pointed forward, which Danny had learned meant he was concerned. "You do not sleep," Koss said. Danny sat down on his own bed. He was very tired. His eyes felt like someone had filled them with sand. "I sleep a little. Your skin has changed. There is darkness under your eyes. This is a warning sign for humans, yes? I read about it in my xenobiology class. I'm fine, Koss. You are not fine. You are working on something. The armor project. I have heard the others talking about it. They say you are wasting your time." Danny looked at his roommate. Koss was watching him with those yellow eyes, and there was no judgment in them. Just worry. Just a simple concern of someone who had decided to care about Danny, even though they came from different worlds. "Maybe I'm wasting my time," Danny said. "But I keep thinking about what Instructor Velthos said. The beam adapts. It learns. It finds weaknesses. That means it is reacting to what it hits. It is not just destroying things randomly. It is reading them and then destroying them." Koss tilted his head. "I do not understand. Neither do I, not completely. But think about it. If the beam was just pure energy, it would destroy everything the same way. But it does not. It destroys different materials in different ways. Krethian armor disappears. Zoloni crystal shatters. Hollow steel melts. Why? Because they are different materials? Exactly. The beam is doing something different to each one. It is analyzing them, figuring out their structure, and then attacking them in the way that works best. It is smart, Koss. The weapon is smart." Koss's fur stood up slightly. Danny had learned that this meant the Falari was uncomfortable. "You speak of the weapon like it is alive. Not alive, but not stupid either. And if it is smart enough to find weaknesses, then maybe there is a way to trick it. To give it something it cannot analyze. Something that does not have a structure for it to attack. Is such a thing possible?" Danny lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. "I do not know, but I am going to find out." 3 months later, Danny submitted his first formal request to the Academy's research division. He wanted access to the classified data on the Sunderbeam, the real data. The stuff that was not in the public files. The request was denied. He submitted it. Again. Denied. He submitted it a third time. Denied. He kept submitting it. Every week, a new request. Every week, a new denial. The administrators started recognizing his name. They started sending the denials faster, sometimes within hours of receiving his request. On the 14th submission, something different happened. Instead of a denial, Danny received a summons. He was ordered to appear before the Academy Council. The council chamber was a round room at the top of the tallest tower in the Academy. The walls were made of transparent material, and Danny could see the stars through them. 7 beings sat in a semicircle at the center of the room. They were the most powerful people at the Academy, representatives of 7 different species who had come together to train the next generation of coalition soldiers. Commander Ashira sat in the middle. She was a Velthani, which meant her skin was almost completely transparent. Danny could see through her body to the slow pulse of her 3 hearts and the gentle flow of her blood through her veins. Her eyes were solid white, with no pupils or irises, and when she looked at Danny, he felt like she was seeing things about him that he did not know himself. "Cadet Cole," she said. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it filled the entire room. "You are persistent." "Yes, Commander." 14 requests for classified information. This is unusual. Most cadets who are denied once do not ask again. Most cadets who are denied twice give up forever. You have been denied 14 times, and you are still here. I believe my research could save lives. Commander, one of the other council members, a Crethian whose scales were pale with age, made a rumbling sound. Every researcher believes their work could save lives. That does not mean we give them access to our most dangerous secrets. With respect, Danny said, I am not asking for secrets about how to build the weapon. I am asking for secrets about how to stop it. Commander Ashira leaned forward. Through her transparent skin, Danny could see her hearts beating faster. The data you want contains detailed information about how the Sunderbeam works. In the wrong hands, this information could be used to make the weapon even more deadly. We cannot give such information to a cadet who has not yet completed basic training. Then let me prove myself. Give me a limited access. Monitor everything I do. If I try to misuse the information, you can stop me. The council members looked at each other. Danny could not read their expressions. They were too alien, too different from human faces. But he stood straight and kept his eyes on Commander Ashira and waited. 30 days, Ashira finally said. You will have access to the data for 30 days. Everything you do will be watched. Everything you create will be reviewed. If you produce nothing of value, this matter will be noted in your permanent record, and you will never be allowed to request classified information again. Danny saluted. His hand was shaking, but his voice was steady. Thank you, Commander. I will not waste this chance. He did not produce anything of value in 30 days. Or in 60 days, when Ashira quietly extended his access without explanation. Or in 90 days, when Danny started skipping meals to spend more time in the engineering bay. But he kept working. Every night. Every free moment. He read the data. He ran simulations. He built small test pieces and watched them fail. He built more test pieces and watched them fail differently. Cost brought in food sometimes. Prith stopped making fun of him, which was somehow worse. The other cadets started to avoid him, like failure might be contagious. But Danny kept working. Because somewhere in all that data, somewhere in all those failures, there was an answer, and he was going to find it. 1 year into his training at the academy, Danny Cole collapsed. He was sitting at his workstation in the engineering bay, staring at a holographic display that showed his latest design when the world suddenly turned sideways. He did not feel himself fall. One moment he was sitting up, and the next moment he was on the floor, looking at the ceiling, unable to move his arms or legs. A maintenance drone found him 2 hours later. It was a small machine, about the size of a dog, designed to clean the floors and fix broken equipment. It did not know what to do with an unconscious human, so it sent an alert to the medical wing and waited beside Danny until help arrived. Danny woke up in a white room. The bed was soft. The air smelled like chemicals. There were tubes attached to his arms, pumping fluids into his body. Instructor Velthos was standing at the foot of his bed. The Crethian looked different than he did in class. Smaller, somehow. Or maybe it was just that Danny was lying down and looking up at him. His 4 eyes were all focused on Danny's face, and there was something in them that Danny did not expect. Not anger, not disappointment, something closer to sadness. You are a fool, Velthos said. Danny tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He coughed instead. The doctors say you are suffering from severe exhaustion. You have not slept properly in weeks. You have not eaten properly in months. Your body was beginning to shut down. Cadet Cole, if the drone had not found you when it did, you might have died. Danny finally managed to speak. His voice sounded like someone else's voice, rough and weak. I was close to something. You were close to death. No, in my research. I was close to understanding something important. Velthos was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked around the bed and sat down in a chair that was too small for him. His scales scraped against the plastic, making a sound like sandpaper. I have seen your work, he said. I have been watching you since the day you asked your question in my class. I have read your notes. I have studied your designs. They are creative. I will admit that. You think about the problem in ways that no one else has thought about it before. But creativity is not enough. The Sunderbeam has defeated minds far greater than yours. Scientists who spent their entire lives studying the weapon. Engineers who had resources you cannot imagine. They all failed. What makes you think you can succeed where they could not? Danny stared at the ceiling. He thought about the question for a long time before he answered. The Vorn invented it. He said, double quotes, yes. So that means someone figured out how to make it work. Someone looked at the universe and saw a possibility that no one else had seen. They did something that everyone else thought was impossible. The Vorn are an ancient species. They have been studying physics for longer than humans have existed. But they were not always ancient. Once they were young like us. Once they were just starting to understand the universe. And somewhere along the way, one of them had an idea that changed everything. Danny turned his head to look at Velthos. If they could do it, someone else can do it too. Maybe not me. Maybe not in my lifetime. But someone. Velthos was quiet again. Then he reached into his uniform and pulled out a small data chip. It was black and shiny, no bigger than Danny's thumbnail. This is the original Vorn research, he said. It was captured during the Battle of the Hollow Star, 300 years ago. It contains information about how the Sunderbeam was invented, how it works at the most basic level. It is the most classified document in the entire coalition. Danny's heart started beating faster. He could hear it on the medical monitors, beeping quickly in the quiet room. Why are you showing me this? Because I have lived for 400 years, Cadet Cole. And in that time, I have learned that sometimes the impossible is simply the not yet possible. I have seen things that should not exist. I have watched young officers accomplish things that ancient generals said could never be done. He held out the chip. You humans have a saying. Something about dogs and their bones. Like a dog with a bone, Danny said. Yes, that. You do not give up. It is annoying. It is foolish. And sometimes, very rarely, it is exactly what is needed. Danny took the chip. His hand was shaking. If anyone finds out you gave me this, then we will both face consequences that I do not wish to describe. But I am old, Cadet Cole, old enough to take risks that younger officers would not take. Velthos stood up from the chair. Do not make me regret this. And do not die. It would be a waste. He left without saying anything else. Danny spent 2 more days in the medical wing. The doctors made him eat real food and sleep real sleep. They ran tests on his body and told him that he had been very stupid and very lucky. He agreed with both statements. On the 3rd day, he was released. He went back to his room, where Koss was waiting with a bowl of soup and a worried expression. Eat, the Falari said. Then sleep. Then you can tell me what you are planning. Danny ate. He slept. And then, when the academy was quiet and the artificial night had fallen, He plugged the data chip into his workstation and began to read. The Vorn research was not what he expected. It was not full of complicated equations or advanced physics. Instead, it was full of observations. Simple observations about how things worked at the smallest level. The scientist who invented the Sunderbeam had started by studying music. Danny read that part 3 times to make sure he understood it. Music. The Vorn scientist had been fascinated by the way certain sounds could make objects vibrate. The way a singer could shatter a glass by hitting exactly the right note. The way a drum could make the floor shake if you hit it hard enough. The Sunderbeam worked the same way. It did not burn things or melt things or tear things apart. It made them vibrate. It found the natural frequency of whatever material it hit, and then it amplified that frequency until the material shook itself to pieces. That was why different materials were destroyed in different ways. Krethian armor had one frequency. Zeloni crystal had another. Hollow steel had a third. The beam figured out the frequency and then exploited it. Every material in the universe had a frequency. Every material could be made to vibrate until it broke. Every material except one that did not have a fixed frequency at all. Danny sat at his workstation, staring at the holographic display, and felt something click into place in his mind. It was like solving a puzzle that he had been working on for years. All the pieces suddenly made sense. The beam found weaknesses by analyzing structure. So the armor could not have a fixed structure. The beam destroyed materials by making them vibrate. So the armor had to absorb vibration instead of fighting it. The beam adapted to whatever it hit. So the armor had to adapt faster. Danny started designing. He worked for 6 hours without stopping, creating something that had never existed before. A material that could change its properties in real time. A material that would shift and flow when the beam hit it, matching its frequency instead of fighting it, spreading the energy across millions of tiny points until there was nothing left to destroy. He called it liquid steel. It was not liquid. It was not steel. It was something new, something that should not exist. When the artificial sunrise cycle began, Danny had a complete design. He sent it to the Academy's fabrication system with a request for a prototype. 3 days later, he held the first piece of liquid steel in his hands. It was a chest plate, no bigger than a dinner tray, and it was ugly. The surface was uneven. The edges were rough. It looked like something a child had made out of clay. But when Danny tested it against a low-power energy weapon, it held on. When he tested it against a medium-power plasma cutter, it held. When he tested it against a high-intensity beam that should have melted through 6 inches of standard armor, it held. Danny stared at the chest plate for a long time. Then he started building a full suit. The annual Academy combat trials were the biggest event of the year. Every cadet knew about them. Every cadet feared them. And every cadet dreamed of winning them. The trials were simple in concept, but brutal in execution. Cadets would compete in a series of combat scenarios, each one harder than the last. They would be judged on speed, skill, tactics, and survival. The cadets who performed best would receive immediate commissions as officers in the coalition fleet. The rest would return to their studies for another year, hoping to do better next time. Danny Cole registered for the trials 3 weeks before they began. He filled out the standard forms, answered the standard questions, and then added a special equipment notation at the bottom. Personal armor, non-standard design. The Academy officials did not like this notation. Non-standard equipment was technically allowed by the rules. Any cadet could bring their own gear to the trials, as long as it passed safety inspections and did not give them an unfair advantage. But in practice, almost no one did this. The Academy provided excellent equipment. Why would anyone want to use something they had built themselves? Danny's request was flagged for review. Then it was flagged for additional review. Then it was sent to the full trial committee, a group of senior officers who had better things to do than argue about a human cadet's homemade armor. The committee was about to reject the request when Instructor Velthos asked to speak with them privately. No one knows what Velthos said in that meeting. It lasted for almost 2 hours. When it was over, Danny's entry was confirmed. On the morning of the trials, Danny arrived at the staging area wearing his liquid steel suit. It was not a beautiful suit. The other cadets wore armor that had been designed by the finest engineers in the coalition. Their suits were sleek and smooth, with surfaces that reflected light like mirrors. They looked like warriors from ancient legends, powerful and proud and ready for battle. Danny looked like he had wrapped himself in scrap metal. The liquid steel suit was bulky and uneven. It had visible seams where different pieces connected. The joints were thick and clumsy. The helmet was slightly lopsided, sitting crooked on his head no matter how many times he adjusted it. Prith saw him and clicked her mandibles so hard that other cadets could hear it from across the room. "Look," she said to the cadets standing near her. "The human has built himself a coffin. How thoughtful of him to save us the trouble of finding one after he dies." The other cadets laughed. Danny ignored them. He was checking his seals, making sure every connection was tight, making sure every piece was working properly. Koss walked over to him. The Falari was wearing standard coalition armor, a simple suit that would protect him from most weapons, but not from anything as powerful as the Sunderbeam. "Are you ready?" Koss asked. "Yes. Are you scared?" Danny thought about the question. "No, I do not think I am. The others think you are going to fail. I know. What if they are right?" Danny finished checking his seals and looked at his friend. "Then I will fail. But I would rather fail trying something new than succeed by doing the same thing everyone else has already done." The first horn sounded. The trials were beginning. The first 3 rounds were standard tests. Obstacle courses where cadets had to run, jump, and climb while avoiding traps. Tactical puzzles where cadets had to solve problems under time pressure. Simulated firefights where cadets shot at holographic enemies with practice weapons. Danny performed adequately in all of them. His armor was heavier than the standard suits, which made him slower. He finished in the middle of the pack, not good enough to stand out, but not bad enough to be eliminated. Prith finished in the top 5. She made sure Danny saw her score. The 4th round was different. Commander Ashira herself appeared on the main stage to announce the scenario. Her transparent body seemed to glow under the arena lights, and when she spoke, every cadet in the building could hear her voice clearly. "The 4th round is a survival scenario," she said. "You will face simulated Vorn soldiers armed with simulated Sunderbeams. The simulation is not lethal, but the beams will register any hit as a kill. Once you are hit, you are eliminated. The objective is simple: survive as long as possible. The last cadet standing wins." The other cadets exchanged nervous looks. Everyone knew about the Sunderbeam scenario. It was famous among Academy students because it was impossible to win. The simulated beams worked just like real ones. They tracked their targets. They adapted to evasion tactics. Eventually, they always hit. The scenario was not designed to test combat skills. It was designed to teach humility, to remind cadets that some battles could not be won through strength alone. Danny checked his seals one more time. The simulation began. The arena transformed around them. One moment they were standing in a large empty room. The next moment they were in a ruined city, with broken buildings and burning vehicles and smoke filling the air. Holographic Vorn soldiers appeared on all sides. They were tall and thin, with too many arms and eyes that glowed red in the darkness. They raised their weapons and fired. Within 30 seconds, Half the cadets were eliminated. The beams swept across the battlefield, finding cadets who thought they were hidden, tracking cadets who thought they were fast enough to escape. Standard armor crumpled and vanished. Crystalline shields shattered into nothing. The elimination signals beeped again and again, marking each cadet who had been hit. Koss lasted longer than most. He used his Filari speed to dodge 3 beams in a row. But the 4th beam predicted where he was going to move, and when he jumped left, the beam was already there waiting for him. He was eliminated at the 45-second mark. Danny stood in the center of the battlefield. He was not running. He was not hiding. He was just standing there, in the open, watching the chaos around him. A Vorn soldier turned toward him and raised its weapon. The watching officers held their breath. Prith clicked her mandibles softly, waiting to see the human eliminated like all the others. The beam fired. It hit Danny directly in the chest. His armor rippled. The surface of the liquid steel moved like water. It shifted and flowed, changing shape so fast that it was almost impossible to see. The beam's energy spread across the entire suit, thinning and dispersing until there was nothing left to cause damage. Danny did not fall. Danny did not disappear. Danny raised his own weapon and fired back. The holographic Vorn soldier flickered and vanished. For a moment, the entire arena was silent. Even the simulation seemed to pause, as if the computer controlling it could not understand what had just happened. Then, 3 more Vorn soldiers turned toward Danny and fired at once. His armor rippled 3 times. 3 beams. 3 hits. 0 damage. Danny started moving. He was not fast. His armor was too heavy for speed. But he did not need to be fast. He walked through the battlefield like he was taking a stroll through a park, letting the beams hit him, watching his armor absorb every shot. The other cadets, the ones who had not yet been eliminated, stopped running. They stopped hiding. They just watched as the human did something that should have been impossible. 47 minutes. That was how long the simulation lasted. By the end, Danny was the only cadet standing. His armor was scorched and dented. Several of the outer plates had fallen off completely, revealing the inner layers beneath. The lopsided helmet had a crack running across the visor, but it had held. Against 17 direct hits from the deadliest weapon in the galaxy, it had held. Commander Isira walked onto the battlefield. Her 3 hearts were beating so fast that Danny could see them pulsing through her transparent skin. She looked at Danny for a long moment. Then she looked at the damaged armor. Then she looked at the simulation results on her datapad. Then she started to applaud. One by one, the other officers joined her. The cadets who had been eliminated joined her. Even Prith, standing at the edge of the arena with shock written across her alien face, slowly brought her clawed hands together. Danny stood in the middle of the applause and did not know what to do. So he just stood there, tired and relieved and proud, and let the sound wash over him. He had done it. The impossible had become possible, and everything was about to change. 3 years after the trials, Lieutenant Danny Cole stood on the bridge of the Coalition warship Starward. Hope and watched the enemy fleet appear on the main screen. The Vorn Collective had been at war with the Coalition for 2 years now. It had started with small attacks on border colonies, raids that killed thousands and left cities burning. Then the attacks got bigger. Fleets of Vorn warships swept through Coalition space, using their sunderbeams to destroy everything in their path. Millions of people had died. Entire planets had fallen. The Coalition was losing, and everyone knew it. But today was different. Today, the Coalition was fighting back. Danny looked at the soldiers standing around him on the bridge. They were Krethians in heavy armor, Zaloni with crystalline weapons, Filari with quick hands and quicker minds, humans with steady eyes and stubborn hearts. All of them were wearing the same thing under their species-specific gear. liquid steel, the armor that Danny had invented in a corner of the academy. Engineering Bay was now standard equipment for every soldier in the Coalition fleet. The designs had been refined and improved over the past 3 years. Engineers from 100 different worlds had worked together to make it lighter, stronger, and easier to produce. Now, millions of suits existed, protecting millions of soldiers who would have died without them. Danny had received commendations for his work, medals, promotions, offers of high positions in research, divisions where he would never have to fight again. He had turned them all down. He wanted to be here, on the front lines, wearing the armor he had built. Koss stood beside him at the tactical station. The Falari's fur had changed over the years. There were streaks of silver in the orange now, signs of early aging that came to his species when they experienced great stress. He had refused to leave Danny's side since their academy days, serving as his first officer and his closest friend. The Vorm fleet is larger than we expected, Koss said. 200 warships. Maybe more. Danny nodded. I see them. They will use concentrated fire. All their sonar beams focused on single targets. They have learned that our armor works better against individual hits. I know. Are you afraid? Danny thought about the question. It was the same question Koss had asked him before the trials, 3 years ago. His answer was the same now as it had been then. No, I do not think I am. The battle began. The Vorm fleet advanced in formation, their ships moving together like a single creature. They opened fire at maximum range, sending beams of terrible light across the void between the two fleets. Coalition ships exploded where the concentrated beams found their targets, but fewer ships exploded than the Vorn expected. The liquid steel held. Not perfectly. Not against the massed fire of dozens of beams at once, but well enough. Ships that should have been destroyed in the first seconds of battle survived long enough to return fire. Soldiers who should have been killed in the first volleys lived long enough to reach their escape pods. The Coalition fleet closed the distance. This was the new strategy. The old strategy had been to stay far away, to run, to never let the Vorn get close enough to use their beams effectively. But that strategy had never worked. The Vorn were patient hunters. They always caught their prey eventually. The new strategy was different. The new strategy was to get close, to board enemy ships, to fight the Vorn face to face, where their sunder beams were less effective and Coalition soldiers could use their own strengths. Danny led one of the boarding parties. His shuttle crossed the gap between the two fleets, dodging through beams and explosions and debris. 3 of the soldiers with him were killed when a Vorm beam hit the shuttle's side, tearing through the hull. But the rest survived, protected by their armor. And when the shuttle crashed into the side of a Vorn warship, they were ready to fight. They cut through the hull and entered the ship. The inside of a Vorn vessel was dark and hot, with air that smelled like metal and something sweet and rotten. The corridors were narrow, designed for Vorn bodies that were thinner than most Coalition species. Danny had to move sideways in some places, scraping his armor against the walls. Vorn soldiers met them at every turn. They were not like the holographic versions Danny had fought in the trials. They were real. They bled when they were shot. They screamed when they died. And their weapons were real too, firing beams that hit Danny's armor again and again and again. The liquid steel held. Danny fought through corridor after corridor, room after room. His suit got hotter with each hit, the armor working so hard to disperse the energy that steam started rising from his shoulders. Some of his outer plates fell off. Others cracked and bent. But the inner layers held, and Danny kept moving forward. His goal was the bridge. Every warship had a command center where the officers controlled the vessel. If he could reach it, if he could capture or kill the commanders. The ship would be lost to the VOR and he reached the bridge after 40 minutes of fighting. The room was larger than he expected, filled with strange machines and screens that showed images Danny could not understand. Bodies of Vorn officers lay on the floor, killed by the soldiers who had entered with Danny. Only a few of his team were still alive. Koss was one of them, his fur singed and his armor dented, but his eyes still bright and determined. And at the center of the bridge, standing alone, was the Vorn Supreme Commander. He was taller than the other Vorn, almost 9 feet, with 7 eyes arranged in a circle around his head. His armor was black and covered with symbols that glowed with a pale blue light. In his hands, he held a weapon unlike anything Danny had ever seen. "Human," the Supreme Commander said. His voice was deep and strange, with sounds that human throats could not make. "You are the one who built the armor." Danny raised his weapon. "Yes, I have studied you, read reports about you, watched recordings of your battles. You are not what I expected. You are small, weak. Your species has only been part of the coalition for a few decades. And yet you have done something that no one else has done in centuries. I got lucky." "No." The Supreme Commander raised his weapon. "You were stubborn. There's a difference. Luck runs out. Stubbornness does not." The weapon in the commander's hands hummed with power. Danny recognized the sound. It was a sunderbeam, but different from the standard ones. Older, more powerful. "This is the original," the Supreme Commander said. "The first sunderbeam ever built. The prototype that all others were copied from. It has been in my family for 8 generations. It killed the first world that ever fell to the Vorn. Billions of lives ended by this weapon." Danny did not move. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand what you are facing. Your armor is impressive, human. It has changed the war. It has given your coalition hope where there was none. But this beam is not the same as the ones you have survived before. It is stronger, older, more refined. No armor can hold against it." Danny remembered sitting in Instructor Velthus's class years ago. He remembered hearing those exact words and thinking that they sounded like a challenge. "Then hit me with it," he said. The Supreme Commander fired. The beam was brighter than anything Danny had ever seen. It was not just light. It was the absence of everything else, a whiteness so complete that it seemed to erase the world around it. Danny felt it hit his armor. He felt the liquid steel scream. The armor shifted. The armor flowed. The armor changed shape faster than it had ever changed before, reaching the very edge of what was possible, pushing against limits that Danny had not known existed. For a moment, one terrible moment, Danny thought it was going to fail. Then the moment passed. The beam faded. The light died. And Danny was still standing. The Supreme Commander stared at him with all 7 of his eyes. For the first time in his ancient life, he understood what it meant to face a species that did not know how to give up. Danny raised his weapon. His voice was steady. "Surrender your fleet." The war ended that day. Years later, people would argue about why the Vorn surrendered. Some said it was because they were losing too many ships. Some said was because their Supreme Commander was captured. Some said it was because they simply got tired of fighting. But the soldiers who had been there, the ones who had worn the liquid steel and felt the beams bounce off their bodies, they knew the truth. It was not the armor that won the war. The armor was just a tool. Tools did not win wars. People did. It was the human who had looked at a weapon that could not be stopped and decided to stop it anyway. It was the stubbornness, the refusal to accept limits, the deep belief that every problem had a solution if you worked hard enough to find it. It was the thing that made humans human. Danny Cole retired from the military when he was 42 years old. He went back to Earth, to a small town in Ohio, and took a job teaching engineering at a local university. He never talked much about the war or the armor or the lives he had saved. When students asked about his service, he would shrug and change the subject. But on his desk, in a place of honor next to photographs of his family and friends, he kept a small piece of metal. It was scorched and dented and ugly. It was the first chest plate he had ever built. The one that had started everything. Sometimes, late at night, when the university was quiet and the stars were bright outside his window, Danny would pick up that piece of metal and remember. He would remember the academy, the engineering bay, the nights